Hello, Love Warriors. Welcome to Love in the Time of Corona. I have another one of my special guests. I'm pulling out the bag, out the tricks, and you're in for another treat for tonight. Oh, she's here already. I'm going to join you in one moment. Just wanted to say that I had an amazing conversation with Raven Western. I had at Dream Pusher this morning about self-love, relationships, vulnerability. You don't want to miss it. It was so good that I've decided to invite her back to my platform next week at the Love in the Time of Corona to continue our conversation. So don't miss the replay in her live Insta stories now before it expires. You won't be sorry. So I'm going to have Dr. Shabazz with us today. So I'm going to have her join us. Let's see. Try that again. Barbara, can you request to join again? For some reason, I clicked yes, but it disappeared. Let's see. Can you try to request or type something to me? Are you having problems joining? It's not allowing me to request again. Okay, so maybe leave the live and then come back. Let's see what happens. Hope you're all having a good week, that your Monday's off to a great start. We have another special guest with us on Wednesday. We have pastor and author Jonathan Merritt, and I can't wait to present him to you and to us to discuss on this platform, you know, being single and scripture and being a prayerful single woman and not losing hope and faith when those times feel like we feel hopeless and feel like it's not going to happen. So I'm going to have him on Wednesday, so don't miss it. Let's see. Hello, John Chapman. I gave your full name. I'm sorry. Thanks for joining. I'm just waiting for our guest to join. I don't know if she's having trouble. Hello, Zarahi? Zara. Thank you. Thank you for joining. Percy, welcome. Thank you for joining. Hi, John. I know, just give all your privacy, right? I'm not getting a request. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Let's see if this works. No, it's not. Okay, hang on. Let's try something. I think I'm going to have to, okay. It's not working. Not sure why it's not working. Oh, here we go. It looks like it's having you join. There you go. Here we go.
Can you hear me? Can you see me?
I can see you. I can hear you. Thank you for your patience. Welcome, Dr. Barbara Shabazz. Thank you for joining us in the Love in the Time of Corona. For everyone tuning in, this is Dr.
Okay.
I don't see you anymore. I see.
Hold on. Let me see.
Your computer.
Uh-oh.
Did you turn your camera around?
I think I did, but let me see.
If there's something in the room you don't want us to see, oh, okay. It looks like she left and is coming back. I know I put you on blast, John. I'm really sorry. I'm sorry. Nothing but love. So type in one word to describe how you're feeling in this moment. One word. How you feel, and make sure you identify an emotion. And tired is not an emotion. So how do you feel? And identify it in one word and in one emotional word. Okay, let's try it again. She's going to join us again. Barbara, you need to request again. I don't see a request from you. You feel grateful. Awesome. Wonderful. Anyone else? Relaxed. Wonderful. Barbara, I'm not getting a request from you. Let's see. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. Nope, I don't. Okay, so I think you'll have to disconnect. Now, let's see if I can. It doesn't have you on here as a. No, I think you'll have to leave again and come back. And then as soon as it pops up, there you go. I think it's working. You're feeling thankful. I love that everyone's feeling thankful and grateful. You know, those are.
Yes, it's coming now.
There we go. All right, she's back. I'm happy to hear people feeling grateful and thankful in these times of uncertainty, because that is the emotion that will propel us through this in a healthy, positive way. So,
Definitely.
Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Dr. Barbara F. Shabazz here to 11 Time of Corona, who is a psychologist from Virginia.
Yes.
And thank you for joining us tonight. I'm so
Thank
thankful
you,
to have
Angela.
you.
Thanks for having me, and please call me Barbara.
I'm going to call you Barbara, but I like Dr. Shabazz too.
Okay.
So, and you feel blessed. I love that you feel blessed. I feel blessed too. Linda, welcome. Okay, so we're going to talk about a really important topic tonight.
Yes.
And I'm so excited to have you. Earlier today, I did a live on someone else's Instagram, and we talked about vulnerability.
Love Raven.
Relationship. Oh, yeah. Oh, right. You know Raven. Yeah, it was
Yes.
a really powerful conversation that we're going to have a part 2 next week. So
nice.
I wanted to bring you on as a professional psychologist to really talk about mental health. Mental health in this time, but because this is love in the time of Corona, it's spreading love, not fear. But it's also about romantic love and how we cannot lose hope, or we don't have to lose hope during this time. And so I want to delve deeper into different topics of love and relationship. And you can't go into those topics of love and intimacy without talking about mental health.
Very true. Yeah. Very true.
So before we get started, I'm remiss by, hello, welcome, Raven. We just spoke you up.
Hey, Raven.
So I would be remiss not asking you first, how are you doing and how are you coping with quarantine?
Yes, thank you. I am doing well. So while I am empathetic to those who are suffering, I'm also grateful to have a little bit of time to just disconnect and bring it down a little bit. So, you know, other than the grocery bill and the electricity that went out for us last week, which was like a double whammy, we're blessed and we're doing well.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you.
I think it's important for us to not feel guilty for feeling blessed and grateful, and that we can feel grateful and blessed and still have empathy and compassion for people who are really struggling during these times. You know, we are a greater service to other people when we come with compassion, empathy, than, you know, everyone being in the frequency of suffering. So I think we have to be okay with feeling grateful and blessed while others are being challenged as well. They would want us to feel grateful and blessed, and that's the healing energy that we all need. So anyway,
it is okay.
It is okay. It is absolutely okay. So let's talk about mental health, you know, just in general with the quarantine, and, you know, what are some of the warning signs or behaviors, red flags that we should look at within ourselves for new erratic behaviors, or just general mental health check-ins? What should we look for during this time for men, women, everyone across the board?
Right. Of course, mental health is just as important as physical health. And usually when we hurt physically, we try to Google our symptoms, right? And we see what we have. But mental health symptoms are a little bit different. And sometimes it's hard to explain what we're feeling or what we're experiencing. And while it's not wise to self-diagnose, if you are experiencing distress, an inability to function in your daily relationships, such as work, activities that you normally enjoy, you might not exactly have a label for what's going on with you, but you have a good idea that something is going on, and, you know, it might be a good idea to seek help. So that's the beauty of mental health right now. There's so many health professionals who are providing the virtual services. They're equally open to helping each other, the actual helpers, help other people and serve those who are in crisis. So even the stigma there is lessened because, you know, the mental health professionals are getting the same type of help that we're advocating for everyone to get.
Yeah.
So when you find yourself unable to basically pull yourself out of a place that isn't very common for you, then it's a good time to reach out.
And what might that look like and show up as in your day to day? Is it not being able to get out of bed,
Mm-hmm.
crying
Mm-hmm.
inconsolably, or frequently?
Yeah.
Like what does that look like?
Sure, sure, sure. Well, it's different for everyone, but basically it's going to look like you not being able to function like you normally do. And if you feel distressed and you're not able to carry out your daily activities, it's affecting your work, it's affecting your relationships, then it's time to reach out.
Mhm.
And you know, even if it's not a mental health professional, talk to a friend because sometimes friends are loving enough and objective enough to tell us, hey, I'm concerned about you. Something is just not right.
Yeah. And as a
Yeah,
professional, are you concerned about the mental health and well-being of the population during this time?
definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. I'm concerned about the first responders' mental health right now
Mhm.
more than anybody else's. Right now, the rest of us who are not on the front lines, a lot of us don't even know how we're being affected. And some of us won't know until this is over. And, you know, I've read a lot of articles about PTSD, and we know that social isolation can result in PTSD. We know it can result in anxiety, fear, uh, poor health, depression. And after this, yes, I know we talked a little bit about what will mental health look like
Look like.
post corona, right?
Yeah.
And so people are going to have to be picking up the pieces from job loss, financial challenges, actual loss of life, of friends and loved ones. And then there's also this thing we call survivor's guilt, because some of us are going to be blessed to not have been affected, you know, in the same way as some others. So it's my hope that the mental health professionals are prepared to offer help with the same type of urgency as now, because it will indeed be needed.
Hmm. And
Yeah.
so, how do we get ahead of the eight ball now? What can we do
Right.
to promote healthy mental health so
Yeah.
that we come out of this with
Mm-hmm.
as limited,
Mm-hmm.
disability in our mental health or impairments or changes in our mental health as
Right.
possible?
I think it's important to, first of all, not compare, but
Mm.
definitely do those self checks. Try to not escape your feelings, but try to kind of sit with them. You know, we get in the habit when we're so busy, when we're so distracted, of running away from ourselves. And this time, right now, I know someone said, I read that they said the stay at home order is exposing our ability to cope with who we've become. So we're not so used to sitting with our emotions. And so that's the first place to start. And if we're aware of our feelings, then we're more in tune with how we're coping, well or not so much.
Yeah, that's so
Yeah.
powerful. I'm a firm believer that, feelings are good,
Mm-hmm.
such a powerful tool and
Yes.
assessment as to what's going on with us, checking in with your feelings, but not
Yeah.
even just in the current status of our feelings, but
Yeah.
there's some deep rooted emotions that could
Mhm.
come up that could be
Exactly.
overwhelming for people. And I think you're saying pretty much if you feel the presence of not being able to
Hmm.
cope and function is to
Yes,
contact a professional.
definitely. Or even if some people don't feel comfortable doing that because
Mhm.
they've never had that experience, they don't want to share their inner emotions with, you know, a stranger. But even if it's reaching out to a friend, you know, hopefully it's a friend who can help you find help if it's beyond their scope of ability to help.
And do you have call to actions that you give clients to sort of help combat that isolation, the loneliness, the, you know, connecting with feelings? Any exercises that you can recommend?
You know, I talk quite a bit with clients lately about loneliness. In fact, I spoke with my dad today, and he's a therapist. And he told me he had a client who was overseas and he was serving in the military. And he said, you know, I feel really lonely. And I said, well, what did you tell him? Because I told him how I was going to be talking with you today a little bit. And he said, well,
is he Dr. Shabazz also who joined?
He is not. That's my husband.
That's your husband. I knew it was either your husband or someone. So yes. Welcome the other Dr. Shabazz.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't know if he's in here yet, but yes.
He was. Someone joined.
He was.
Someone
okay.
Joined with your name. Yeah.
That might have been him. Okay. Yeah. Well, I did. He said that he told him, make sure that you try to reach out to someone who's experiencing the same type of feelings. Mm-hmm. Because it might help for you to bounce some ideas off of each other. You know, when we talk about being alone and loneliness, sometimes we use those words interchangeably, but they're very different.
In what way do you do?
You said, what's that?
In what way do you clarify the difference?
Right. So loneliness is more of a distressing feeling. Okay. We're feeling like something is missing, that we're incomplete. But being alone is a presence. It's a fullness. It's knowing that we're enough. So we need a balance. We do need a balance of engaging with people, but we also need to be okay with being alone. And we need to find joy in being alone before we can find it with someone else. So with some of my clients, I do tell them there are benefits to being alone. I tell them that we get introspective. You know, that me time is great, especially for people right now who are stuck in a house with people all day long. You know, they probably can attest to that feeling of aloneness and how it's necessary. But for my clients and friends of mine who, you know, are truly by themselves during this time alone, keeping a schedule is good. Also trying not to spend too much time binge watching things, self-medicating is good. Yeah. Reading, journaling. I know people hate journaling sometimes.
Did you see what your husband wrote?
I did. I see it now. I do. Yes. But people hate journaling, you know, sometimes people either love it or they hate it.
I love it.
Yeah, me too. And, you know, it's the best place to do like a brain dump. And what people don't realize is it helps them to declutter their minds. And it opens you up for other possibilities and for more meaningful activities because you can kind of just leave it there. I also encourage my clients to connect with others, of course, practicing self-care, and that can be part of a routine as well. Also making a bucket list about some things that they'd like to do when outside opens up again, you know, because that gives us hope and something to look forward to. So yeah, it might not be comfortable, but if we can get away from the TV and the technology and just sit with ourselves, we might learn so much more.
Okay, so what do you say and speak to the person who's so uncomfortable sitting with themselves, being alone with themselves? It's unfamiliar, it's scary, it's distressing. They numb themselves out, you know, they've kept themselves distracted their whole lives. Where do they start? Like, they're cringing every moment.
Yep, because they're so anxious and so unsettled. Baby steps.
Baby steps.
Baby steps. And one day, well, some people 1 hour at a time. But if you just try to maybe implement one thing a day or one thing a week, whatever you can commit to, just try it out. Baby steps.
I love that. Sure. Thank you. Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how people come out of this? You know, are they going to just like going to want to run and go see everybody and hang out and have a big party? Or they're going to be like, you know, I really appreciate this time alone. I'm going to go to dinner by myself. I'm going to plan a
Right.
vacation by myself. You know, all these things of getting to know
Yeah.
themselves for the first time. I mean, I've
Right.
traveled alone extensively,
You
and it's
have.
been the greatest experiences of my life. I've had the most
Mhm.
amazing traveling experiences when traveling alone. Yeah,
Wow.
I
That's
have.
what I hear people say, and I've
Oh,
never done it before, but I hear people say that all the time. Well, yeah.
it's vulnerable, but you don't
Hmm.
have a crutch. You don't have anyone else to sort of
Hmm.
buffer the aloneness with or the loneliness with. It's just you. But I also find that
Yeah.
when you're traveling alone, you know, the walls come down and you're a little more open. And that
Mm.
openness attracts different people and different
Mm.
experiences. I've met people from around the world.
Wow.
I've engaged in different activities and things I probably wouldn't have done before, but
Yeah.
it's just being in a place that's open and approachable that maybe we might
Mm.
not be if we're with other people.
Right. I like that, the buffer that you
Yeah.
talk about.
Oh, yeah. It's
Right.
easy when you have someone there with you to kind of
Yeah.
have a buffer. You're never alone and never, you know,
Exactly.
making contact with the people in the restaurant or other places. But when you're traveling
Right.
alone and you're not using your phone as a buffer either,
Yes.
you can meet some really amazing people and have some amazing opportunities and experiences. So I'm all
I
for
can
it. But I'm curious to
imagine.
see, you know, how people are going to respond post-corona.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
think you'll have both. I
I
think
think so
you'll have
too.
those people that say, "Oh, I am so sick of myself,"
Yeah.
and people who have been able to avoid joining and having those walls come down. People who have been able to avoid it, and then you'll have those people who have been more contemplative and they say, "Wow, I don't want to go back to what I considered to be normal before."
Right.
So that's the beauty of it, the ability to have that experience and that growth if we choose.
I think so too.
Yeah.
So this is a dating and relationship platform. So I want to talk
Yes.
about mental health as it
Yeah.
relates to romantic partnership.
Of
During this
course.
pre-corona, corona,
Uh-huh.
post-corona, let's get into the nitty-gritty of relationships and mental health,
Yes.
because a lot of people never check in, never you know, assume that they have healthy mental health just because, and
Right.
think that, you know, many of us think that we're equipped and prepared for relationship just because we desire it, but we
Right.
haven't done the mental health check assessment.
Mm-hmm.
Do I have the mental and emotional capacity to be in a relationship, to
Mm-hmm.
sustain a relationship?
Mm-hmm.
If you can't
Mm-hmm.
sustain a relationship with yourself, I mean, think of how much more you're adding on to that when you're in a
Right.
relationship with someone else. So
Very true.
let's talk about that. Let's talk
Okay.
about, you know, let's talk about, you know, we talked about this earlier with Raven, need versus
Yeah.
desire, but let's talk about approaching
Mm-hmm.
relationships from a healthy place mentally. What
Yes.
does that look like? And then what does it look like when we're not healthy necessarily mentally? And we might want to stave a relationship off at this point until we've addressed some mental health concerns.
Right, right. Okay, so of course we can start by saying and admitting to the fact that we are all flawed, pretty much all of us, and we're going to continue evolving,
Mm-hmm.
maturing as we live and have different experiences, right? Um, but if you're in a position where you're coping in a healthy way right now, you're not doing any of those negative behaviors or behaviors that are detrimental to yourself, and you're not seeking someone to fill that void that you might have, that loneliness void, then there's no harm in testing the waters to see, whichever way that looks for you. However, we have to remember that people cannot save us. Okay. But if we're willing to recognize maybe what was unhealthy about a previous relationship, what the relationship taught us, admitting our shortcomings, because that's very hard sometimes for people to actually be honest. I'm in the right place. That's my cousin. Be honest
Hello,
with
cousin.
ourselves, decide what behaviors will correct, and decide what behaviors we'll accept and won't accept, and how to be the person that we want, how to be to someone what we want from them. Then that's a good sign that we're in a good place. If you can answer yes to, do I have to have someone to make me feel whole? Then you're probably seeking partnership from a place of loneliness. But if you can answer yes to, it would be nice to talk to someone and have companionship during this time, then you're probably seeking a relationship from a more healthy place. But just like we said before, you have to be able to find joy alone before you can find it from someone else. And you have to kind of fix your stuff beforehand, because if not, you'll go around taking your baggage with you. I'm in a good place. Yes, but if you don't have that, then you'll go around trying to get people to fix you ultimately. And that's just not fair.
Yeah.
And it's not healthy either.
That's a lot of responsibility on someone else to be in charge of your happiness and your wholeness. And it's impossible for someone else to do. And so what are some of the signs of, again, people often pursue relationships not from the healthiest state.
Yes. One of the biggest signs is, one of the red flags is control. I think when people feel like they need to control or change someone, it's usually because they don't have control of themselves.
That's good. I wish I could put a heart up there myself. I love that.
Yes. And so whether we're, just fresh out of a relationship or we've been single for a long time, when people are not willing to work on themselves first, that's one of the most glaring red flags. And so everything becomes projection and deflection. And, at that point, you're kind of blindsided, and you're basically a punching bag if you're choosing to stay in it.
And are those some of the same red flags that we would look for, not just in ourselves, but in someone else? I'd love to talk about dating apps and dating during quarantine. There are people who are doing virtual dates, and I'm in agreement with them, as long as you stated earlier, if it's coming from a place of, it'd be nice to have companionship at this time. We're human.
Exactly.
It's not saying you have to tough it out and just do this all alone and isolate yourself. There's nothing to prove here. But so I'm all for the virtual dating from a healthy place.
Definitely.
But what are some of the warning signs? And I'm just going to speak, my platform is largely women. So I want to first speak about what are some of my platform is largely women who date men. I should clarify that.
Okay.
What are some of the warning signs, red flags, women on these dating apps can spot out early on about a person's mental health as well as their emotional intelligence?
Their emotional intelligence.
That's a big subject.
You talked about how dating online, because that's pretty much the only way that it's possible right now if people are adhering to the stay-at-home mandates and everything. But the good thing about right now is that even though we're on social media and it's still about the highlight reel and people can still lie and that type of thing, it's harder to kind of present the representative right now. And people are more in their natural state, which is refreshing. So it's a little harder to keep up the facade. But one thing that I always talk to my clients about is, no matter what the situation is, make sure that
that's great. You're just so beautiful that people, a mask can't even cover up your beauty.
Not at all.
You look, it's fashionable, and you look beautiful with a mask.
Exactly.
You're just
She does. That's right. But if people's actions don't match up with their words, that's just a glaring red flag. And so if we're listening for the alignment with those two, I think that's half of the battle.
Yeah. That's what Raven and I spoke about earlier.
Is that right?
It's consistency.
Yeah.
consistency and integrity, and people showing up and you know, being honorable with their word
Yeah.
and
Right.
consistent with their word and their actions. I think, you know,
Exactly.
people reveal themselves in that vein very early on, and if we're paying attention, you know.
Right.
But I
If
still
we're
think,
noticing.
right, and you know, but there's a lot of veils you can hide behind when you're
Lurking.
dating online. I mean, although if
Mhm.
you're a very conscious person, conscious woman,
Mhm.
you can pick up things pretty quickly.
Mhm.
I mean, you can pick up patterns, the way they text, the way they speak.
Right.
You know, you can get an
Right.
energy, a vibe on the phone. So I'm
Yeah.
encouraging people, you know, get on the phone and talk, you know,
Right.
as soon
Yeah,
as you
definitely
can.
more than just
Texting.
interacting. Right.
But I feel,
Exactly.
you know, there are things that are, you know, not really accessible to us right now while we're
Of
in
course.
quarantine. Not just the physical aspect
Hmm.
of dating and relationship, but you know, it takes time to get to know someone. And
Right.
you know,
Right.
there's a couple premises in which I believe you can't really know a person. And one is you can't really know someone until you've had a conflict, and to
Right.
see how they
Right.
handle conflict. And the
Yeah.
other is, how does he handle it when he doesn't get his way?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
and other things that
Exactly.
reveal his character. But we don't have that right now.
No.
Or do we? Maybe you can tell us a way that we can
Well,
sort of see those signs.
I don't know. My husband's up here, so he always says
Chime on
that.
in, Dr.
I know,
Shabazz.
right? He always says that women always know. He
We do
says
know.
that we know. That's how we're wired. We just choose to ignore those red flags. And another thing I always talk with my clients about, you call me out, Angela.
Yes, I
Another
am.
thing I always talk to my clients about is hope. And I think hope is the one thing that keeps us in relationships longer than we need to be in them.
Why do we do that? Why do
Because
women?
we're nurturers and we think we can fix them, and we think the longer that we stay in it, we can do this. So it's like our project. And so if we can succeed at our project, then he will be conflict or disaster tragedy. He will be, this stand-up guy who we see the potential in him to be. So hope is a good thing, but with us, sometimes it can be a major fail because we see the red flags. We just say, you know what? Eh, it's okay. We're just gonna
No
let them
one's
fly
perfect.
for a
Yeah.
little bit. Yeah. Yeah.
I've heard of, and I think this is sort of a powerful experiment, is while dating, is to
Mhm.
have a dating accountability partner.
Mm.
Someone, a friend that you can be
Mhm.
extremely vulnerable with,
Right.
someone that knows your dating patterns and history and can
Yeah.
say it and call it like it is when you
Right.
talk to them about that relationship, you know, because
Yeah.
when the heart's vested, it does
Mhm.
cloud judgment a little bit. It clouds
Exactly.
perception. It clouds, you know, thought processes a little
Right.
bit. So it's
Yeah.
nice to have another set of lens
It
on,
is.
you know, of someone who's objective. What do you think of that? You know,
There's a quote that I've always told my clients, and the
hope is,
quote is, it's
hi,
hard.
Kevin. Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's right. It's true. It's hard to see the picture when you're sitting in the frame.
Ooh,
So, not
tweetable, as
only
Oprah would say, tweetable.
not only do you need someone with another set of lens for you, that person needs to know that you're not going to get angry with them
Right,
when they point out in an objective way something that might not be good for you.
right.
But usually, sometimes we find ourselves aligning with accountability partners who are just like an amen corner,
Well,
or
you
who
can't choose
just,
someone you can't choose someone who's going to always say yes
no,
to you. No, you need
right,
someone who is going to, you know, not
exactly,
take things personally. And, you know, you have to
right,
have this agreement that you're not going to take things personally. There's no hurt feelings here.
yes,
And that if you're coming to me for
right,
my, you know, opinion or
mm-hmm.
advice or
Mm-hmm.
reflections on what you've shared, there has to be the willingness
Right,
to listen, to adhere to it. Otherwise, it's not
mm-hmm.
really, you know, a partnership.
Effective,
But
exactly,
it's not effective. But it's good to have someone, another set
mm-hmm.
of eyes, to see
Mm-hmm.
you going down a similar rabbit hole or path and say, hey, you
Cliff,
know, this is sounding like that other guy, or this is sounding like, you know, well, what about this? And then, you
yeah,
know, it does help you put things into perspective. I shut
yeah,
everyone out of my relationship. This And I do too. I'm
Yes.
very, very, very private.
Private.
However, I have found someone that I do share much more about my
Right.
relationships and extreme
Yes.
vulnerability with. And it feels like a very, very safe space for me. And if she pushes, I might push too, but there's something she can hear that I can't always hear. And I value
Right.
the insight that she has. So it's choosing someone who you value their
Right.
insight, you trust them, you feel comfortable and safe,
Yeah.
but someone that, you know, you're really going to try to be a good partner in the relationship too.
Yes. And
And
that
be,
safe word is key. That's
mm-hmm,
very key there. And back to what we were talking about before, you have to be willing to look at yourself. You have to be willing to admit and be vulnerable. You know, some of that stuff is really embarrassing. When you have friends who constantly check, you know, to see what's going on in relationships where it's not really healthy, those are things that people don't always like to reveal. And people they don't always feel safe enough, or they're not ready enough to be that vulnerable.
And I think if you don't have that with a friend, as you had mentioned earlier, is finding it with a therapist, a coach,
Yeah.
a spiritual counselor, someone that you can be unfiltered, uncensored in your vulnerability, and have someone
Yeah.
really have, you know, professional or accountable eyes on you. And as Raven said, you know, you have to be open to their input. That
Yes.
has to be part of the agreement. And I think
Yes.
it's I
Open.
think it's a great part of dating. And the person who said you've been dating very privately and your relationships are cut off from everyone, I understand that, but it is something to consider.
Yeah.
I like
Yeah.
this though. I share with my sister. She is married, so I think it's easier for me to share. Yes.
Yes. Yes, that's true. And so she found her accountability partner in her sister. And plus her sister has all of the experience, that relationship experience.
Right.
So, you know, at least the way she does her relationship.
And do
It kind of
you
gives them.
practice or study a lot of emotional intelligence?
You know, I've talked about it from time to time with my students, and it does come up in some of our sessions, some of the sessions I have with clients, just being aware
Okay.
and being, you know,
Yeah.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
okay, so then let me phrase the question this way then.
Mm-hmm.
So you're a married woman. How long have you been married?
I am. This is year 23.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank
That's
you. Thank
wonderful.
you.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
for the non-married folk and even
Mm-hmm.
the married folk who want to
Yeah.
reach 23 years of marriage and beyond,
Yes.
what are if he wrote hashtag emotional intelligence. What are let's just say
Mm-hmm.
what are the five, in your opinion, top
Mm-hmm.
relationship
Mm-hmm.
intelligence quotient or characteristics that we
Hmm.
should have or could have to
Right.
embody and create a healthy marriage? And I mean,
Top five.
I want to kind of be specific in that it's not just a
Yes.
boyfriend and dating. I mean,
Right.
really five core
Yeah.
characteristics of a healthy marriage. Going into that, what do we need to sort of, you know,
Right.
be working on or have in
Yeah.
place or, you know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
strengthen our marriage or really prepare for one?
Of course.
And I'm going
The
to write these down.
Oh my goodness. So the first thing is unconditional love.
For yourself or for your partner? Or both? I
Both.
mean, okay, yeah, yeah.
Both. Mm-hmm. The second is the ability to listen. Uh, the and with the ability to listen, also hearing is a big part of that. Um, the third is knowing the right type of timing. It's like a dance. So I used to always tell my boys there's a time and a place for everything. And so really being sensitive to that timing is important. Okay. And then
When you say
um,
timing, you mean a time to bring up conflict, a time to
everything.
timing for everything.
Timing for everything.
Mm-hmm.
But specifically and in a sensitive way, time for conflict.
For conflict.
For conflict, yes, that's kind of the first thing I thought
And
about.
so if you are a non-married person, how can you
Yes.
practice that skill set?
Oh, that's the perfect skill set to practice even way before you're married, and not even with a partner. You know, you have to gauge what type of place a person is in before you present something to them. And then you also have to think about where you are. And I always talk about using I statements versus you, because you're pointing the finger when you do that. So more specifically, in conflict, timing is everything. It's everything. So
I got to work on that one.
yeah.
I don't always nail that one, you know.
And you might have to write down your issue and save it.
Sometimes it's like I need someone to just like close your mouth, like you like take the phone away, take everything away so that you can't respond or say or do anything for 24 hours. Or like maybe it's making that arrangement or agreement with your partner. Okay, if we're angry, we cannot respond to it or say anything to it for a certain amount of time that we've allowed ourselves to process it.
Yeah, because we shouldn't really do anything in anger. And of course, you know, we know what arguments and conflict look like. But we don't really solve anything in those places where the tempers are so high and flaring up. So, you know, if we can wait, usually we're not as angry. So it doesn't come across as emotionally loaded.
Yes.
And it's also a good idea.
It's so true. And I'm just going to, you know,
no.
And I'm going to ask your husband to comment on this too, because I think that oftentimes that is what pushes men away, that behavior in women, dating and otherwise, when when we, you know, respond very quickly with emotion and, you know, maybe it's irrational, maybe it's very, you know, tempered. Does that sort of thwart a man? Does that, you know, frighten him, turn him off? You know, what are your thoughts? And as well as yours, Mr. Shabazz, Dr. Shabazz.
You know, usually when we do that, it's coming from a place of hurt. And
you ain't never lied. I know it does. I mean, I think being able to be reflective with your anger before responding to it takes a lot of patience and maturity and growth. But at the same time, you just said, sometimes we're just feeling hurt. And our visceral response, right? It's that fight or flight system is to, when we feel like we're being attacked,
we attack back. We want to also hurt the person who hurt us. And
we're wired that way. That's part of our real genetic wiring, you know? So it's not just being completely emotionally irrational.
It's a physiological
fight or flight
response. Exactly. And no, we haven't always been this way. My husband can tell you that I'm the debater, I'm the arguer. He's the flight person. So there were so many years when it took me a long time to learn, like, oh, well, maybe this is not a good time because he's asleep and I'm still like arguing with him.
Yeah, I'd be like, wake up,
exactly. Wake up,
we need to talk.
Exactly. And so that was me. And it took me a while to realize, like, okay, this is not productive. And so when you can get to the point where you're able to have an argument in a neutral location, that's another good, you know, thing that we should be able to have a conflict in a neutral location. So if you want to present a topic to someone, it might be great for you to go to Starbucks because you can't yell and scream and just act crazy in the middle of. Well, you know, you might have to end your conversation in the parking lot.
You can go in your car.
Exactly. You've seen the couples like arguing and stuff like that.
This is great. But I want to go a little deeper too, because not deeper, but really sort of expound on it a little bit in terms of women. We are we're hormonal.
Yes. Yes.
And sometimes
we are.
You know, sometimes I liken it, and I've heard other people describe it, it's like someone else comes in and takes over your body. And I can be zen, I can meditate and be in that
Right.
pause, reflective space.
Uh-huh.
But then there's, a couple times, couple days in the
Mm-hmm.
month where it's
Right.
just, it feels uncontrollable.
Yeah.
Like I'm not in control of myself. I mean,
Right.
in my emotional capacity. I mean, not saying like a complete,
Yeah.
crazy barbaric person or anything, but
Right.
anger often can be that emotion that is just very impulsive.
Mm-hmm.
As much
Mm-hmm.
as I don't want it to be, it can be very triggered and impulsive very
Yeah.
quickly. And, I always say that the only thing more powerful than meditation and prayer is a woman's
Mm-hmm.
hormones.
Yes.
It's almost
I
like it doesn't matter how much we pray or meditate.
know.
When the brain chemistry is different,
Mm-hmm.
it's just
Mm-hmm.
different. And I just,
Yes.
in my and I'm sorry, I'll let you speak, but in my relationships in the past, I've really
Mm-hmm.
had to help my partners understand that part of me
Mm-hmm.
and sort of let them be aware ahead of time of how I'm feeling and let them
Right.
know my calendar so
Yes.
that, there's a little bit
Yes.
more compassion
Right.
toward me and for me
Right.
when I'm in
Perfect.
that space. But
Right.
it
No.
doesn't change or negate sometimes how I
Mm-hmm.
might respond.
Right. That I love the way that you're intentional that way about that those more sensitive times.
Yeah.
I was just talking to my girlfriend yesterday who's a doctor, and we were talking about how hormones control everything.
Everything.
And as you get older, you realize like, whoa, this is what was happening. Oh my, it's huge, everything. And so those might be some of the times, like where we talked about timing, where your partner knows, and so
Mm.
they're more sensitive to what they know you're capable of in that moment. And maybe instead of reacting, they can have a cue or some type of um, ritual or some type of act they do to show you they're supporting you
Yes, that's the key
during that
word,
time.
the
And
support. Hmm.
and to just and then in that way they can help diffuse what you might have going
Completely.
on, or it could even be like a preemptive strike
Completely.
on
If
their
men
part.
if men understand that and are
Yes.
willing to create that,
Mm-hmm.
that understanding of their partner, it really
Right.
would eliminate a lot of unnecessary conflict, so to speak, or,
Yes.
if they're
Yeah.
preemptive and
Right.
yeah, respond with compassion rather than,
Yeah.
oh, more fuel to the fire, right? Things that
Right.
just set her off even more.
Yeah. And of course we have to take responsibility too.
Absolutely.
And that might mean just, having some me time, staying a little longer in the bathroom, going to sit in the car, going to take a walk. So we have to, just not necessarily be ready to go off and have someone kind of bear hug us to calm us down. But at least we know that we have that support in place.
Yeah. Yes, someone wrote, yes, learning the
Learn the
calendar is
calendar.
pivotal. And if there are any men
Yes.
listening or men in your life, they should learn the
Mm-hmm.
calendar. It should be
Very
important for them to
perfect.
learn the calendar. It'll make things
Very
make a
true.
lot more sense for them.
Mm-hmm.
And, not even just during that time, but,
Before,
our
after.
cycles are changing all the time.
Right.
Our cycles are in circadian rhythms with the moon. So the
Mm-hmm.
moon is in a different cycle. So it's
Incredible.
fascinating how many different emotions a woman experiences in a 28-day
Yes.
cycle. So there's
Yes.
times we feel rejuvenated and purposeful and excited, and there's other times we feel agitated and this and that. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying
Mm-hmm.
men learn all of that, but if you'll win some major points if you have
Mm-hmm.
interest in understanding and knowing her calendar. Big
That's
time.
very true. Very true. Important. I love
So
that.
I want to open it up to any questions that anyone has for Dr. Barbara Shabazz. Okay, Barbara, just Barbara.
Thank you,
Any
Angela.
questions? You can type them in or
Mm-hmm.
comment. I think there's a question box. Or is there anything you wanted to add that maybe I didn't ask or that you wanted to share?
You know what? I read something today, and I've been talking quite a bit with my clients. I talked about it on a live last week about just boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, yep, I
Hey,
think
Angelica.
that boundaries are very important here as well. We didn't really talk a lot about specifically.
Yes, please bring up boundaries. Very
Yeah,
important.
but I read this quote today, and the quote is, "Don't ever feel bad for making a decision about your own life that upsets other people. You are not responsible for their happiness. Anyone who wants you to live in misery for their happiness should not be in your life anyway." So I thought that was very applicable to what's going on now and relationships. We can't worry about how our behavior or how our decisions about ourselves will make someone feel.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be empathetic, but we can't live our lives for other people. So we're back to sitting with ourselves. Happiness is an inside job, truly. And so once we realize that we get ourselves together, we're just so much better for someone else in a relationship.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Oh,
Oh, no people
no people
pleasing.
pleasing.
Yes.
Anything else you want to add? Any questions?
Oh, thank you.
That's wonderful.
Thank you.
That's
Thank
very
you. We love
sweet.
you.
Does that change when children are involved?
Not at all. We have a 17-year-old and a 19-year-old, both boys. And I take every opportunity I can to teach them these life lessons. And even when they're fighting with each other in a very unhealthy way, which 17 and 19-year-old boys, I guess they do, even when they're fighting with each other, I point out to them, you're going to have a wife one day. You're going to have children one day. This is not healthy. You all need to establish a healthier pattern of relating to each other, because what you practice here is what you're going to do when you get into those relationships that are, much, much different. So no.
They're fortunate to have you as an example, and I'm sure your husband as well. That's great.
Thank you. Thank you. Some days.
Yeah.
Hopefully most days.
And are both sons home with you all during quarantine?
They are.
Oh, and
They're both here.
And you're the only female in the
I
home.
am.
You have a dog, a female dog?
No, just testosterone. I'm
just
surrounded by it. That's it.
Well,
well, I know a lot about men because I live like in a locker room.
Your husband wrote what? Well, women, we're hardwired to be able to, balance male energy, feminine energy.
That's true.
So
that's true.
You wouldn't have birthed the sun if you weren't able to do that.
I think it's made me take life less seriously. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's a good thing, because I am just driven anyway. So it's good to have that balance.
That's great. And I see someone, is it Kanisha?
Kanisha.
Is she the one that was going to speak in Bakersfield with me?
Yes, exactly.
Well, hopefully we'll be there together soon. I don't know. I think they're being a little ambitious rescheduling it in September, but I don't think we're going to be in close contact by September. But you never know.
I don't either. But I think you all will meet soon, and you all are going to love each other.
It's nice to meet you here, virtually meet you.
That is so cool.
Barbara, I want to thank you so much for coming and sharing your wisdom with us. And I'd love to have you back post-corona, and let's talk about the mental health of people. Let's help people who, might find that they're coming out of this with a little PTSD, how to recognize that if they're not listening today, how to recognize that within themselves in coming months. And maybe, who knows when this is going to change. And that's part of the anxiety for a lot of people.
The process,
sitting in the uncertainty. I have not knowing, and just really trying to find peace with not knowing.
Exactly. What do they say? The only thing certain about right now is uncertainty.
That's it. And really, when you think about it, that goes for every day of our lives pre-corona. We don't know anything from one moment to the next. So I think this is really putting a mirror reflection of life in front of us, that hopefully beyond corona, that we see how limited our control really is.
Definitely. That's right. So surrender is not always a bad thing.
It is not. It
It
is
gives you
not.
a little peace.
I was going to say there's peace in surrender. There's so
Yes.
much, I can't do it all. I don't know how to
Nope.
do it all. I don't know what's next. I
Nope.
just offer it up.
Yeah. That's
So,
right.
oh, I'm glad you
Yeah.
enjoyed it. I thank you all for joining tonight. Have
Thank
a
you. Thank you
wonderful
for
evening.
having
Thank
me.
you. Thank you. And
Yes.
be well and be safe. And
Thank
the other
you.
Dr. Shabazz, it was lovely to meet you as well. All right.
All in the feed.
Take care, everyone. Oh, we'll be
Take
back
care.
Wednesday night with Jonathan Merritt, who is a pastor and author, and he's going to talk about dating, love, and relationships. We're going to talk about scripture. We're going to talk about loneliness in single women, and what does God say about all that? So come Wednesday at 7 p.m.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Angela.
everyone.
Take
Have a good
care.
evening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.